I mean, usually they'll give you a range, like, oh, it's somewhere in the 8.5 to 9 per range or whatever. So maybe try a few more and see what would happen. And that's for cap rates. Yeah, possibly a property management company maybe, or somebody that would be familiar with, again, the apartment owners association would probably maybe have some information on something like that because they track stuff like that. So maybe try that. See if they have an apartment owners association and try that. All right, next victim.
After the LOI, how
Mhm.
much money is going down for a P&S deposit, and then generally how much are you going to be spending on, say, 100 units for due diligence?
Okay. First question was how much is typically down on a on a L or on an offer? Excuse me, on a purchase and sale. Usually it's about 1% of the loan amount or of the purchase amount. So, $1 million deal, you're probably going to have to come in with $10,000 or something like that. On that level, you might want to. What we typically do, if we're coming in with, let's say we're coming in with a $50,000 deposit. What I do a lot of times is I'll go in and say, look. We will go ahead and give you guys 25,000 upon everybody signing the contract. And as soon as we've completed our due diligence in 30 days, excuse me, we'll give you the other $25,000. So that way we're not putting as much money up front. You're splitting it up. That way you're putting as least money up as possible until you absolutely have to. And then the other part was, I'm sorry,
How much are you expected to spend on your due diligence?
It's going to vary around. As far as like a physical inspection to go on, you're typically going to pay roughly $50 a door for a professional inspector to go into every single apartment, look at the roofs, what have you. And then it's going to vary around I would hope if you're getting to the point where you're actually spending money on property inspections and that kind of stuff, you're probably going to want to take a trip down there. So whatever that costs. And then, whether you're going to try to do some of your own on-site financial due diligence, that's probably up to you. You might want to, in some cases, you can hire a property management company to do that for you, or they have companies that you can pay services to go do that, and that's going to vary on what you negotiate with them. But several $1,000s for that, and what they'll do is they'll go and audit the leases, go through all the paperwork in the office. Is there an inventory of what's in the repair shed? What's the office inventory? Do you guys have a list of this? Can you give me a list of all the capital expenditures, things like roofs that were fixed or replaced, stairwells, those are capital expenditures. And, so that service, if you had to pay for it, if you do it yourself, then it's the cost of getting there and whatever and going through all that paperwork. And then what else would be in due diligence? Well, usually when you're in the due diligence period, you're going to have some attorney's fees going on because, first of all, you got attorney's fees for the purchase and sale. And then if you start getting towards the end of that period where you feel like you're going to spend more money, you might start engaging if you're doing a syndication, you might be engaging an SEC attorney. So there's going to be some initial fees there. And then, once that due diligence is over and you're satisfied with that, then you start getting into the lending costs. And typically lending costs will range from, depending on the size of the deal again. But usually most banks are going to want somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 up front when they start processing the loan, because that's what they're going to spend on their due diligence. They're going to pay a property inspector. They're not going to accept your property inspection. And like I said the other day, if you get a property inspection done and you get a copy trying to maybe get a credit for repairs and stuff at closing, try not to get a copy of that to that property manager or a supervisor on that property, because if that somehow gets leaked to the bank when they're doing their inspections, they might take your list, especially if it's got a lot of stuff on it, because that's what you were trying to do, and you're going to end up with that same list that you have to repair now. Yay. I had that happen on a building. And she's a sweetheart of a property manager, but she was just trying to do a good job. But she's like, well, here I have this inspection report. You just cost us $125,000. I hope you realize that. Fabulous. So does that kind of answer it?
Yeah,
Okay.
just a follow-up. If we're starting with limited funds, where should we be getting funds for due diligence? Should we be going to our private lenders and asking them to front that expense for the due diligence?
I don't like doing it that way. I don't like to spend any of my investors' money, unless it might be a family member or something that would work out. But for if it's people that you have a bit of an arm's length, relationship with. I personally don't like spending investors' money. I like to take my own money for the deposits, spend my own money on the due diligence costs, inspection costs, whatever, lenders' costs. And that's also a reason then I use to them for, this is why we get paid the acquisition fee. This is why we are taking a certain percentage of the deal, because I've got to go through all this. I'm the one who's risking my money. If this deal falls apart and I just spent $10,000 on an inspection, guess who took the loss? I did, not my investors. So that's why I get paid the acquisition fee. That's why I get 25 or 30 or whatever percent of this deal. So that's how I do it. If you don't have that, then a suggestion might be, if you can find somebody that would help out with that somehow. I mean, we've done it to the point where in the beginning where we actually just borrowed money from somebody else as a loan, not on the property or not as an investor, but we just said, look, which is a little risky probably, but I said, look, can I borrow, $20,000 to put the deposit down, and then figured out how to work it out later. In my Sue and Lindahl life, one of the things I did was I borrowed money from my 401k for kind of short term, which is probably not the smartest thing again, but that's how I solved my problem. So I got what I needed to get the ball rolling, and luckily the deal all worked out and it all went back. And then the other suggestion would be partner with somebody. Maybe you can find somebody who does have some funds, or maybe just did a flip or something, and they want to work and do what you want to do. You like them, you want to be a partner with them. They can put that money down, then maybe you can be the one who does the due diligence in exchange for that situation. So.
And a big problem that I'm having is not getting the full 12-month trailing P&L. Like I might get a snapshot P&L for right now. So if I can't get any of that information, I would just lower my offer on the LOI, and if they take it, then go ahead and do the due diligence.
Is it because they can't give it to you, they won't give it to you, that you don't know?
I don't know.
Is it an REO or a bank note situation, or is it a standard
No,
deal?
It's just something off LoopNet.
Okay.
Not an REO.
Well, you've asked for it, and they won't give it to you.
Right.
Okay. Well, then probably I would say, you're going to have to. Did they give you a rent roll?
Yes.
Okay.
It just has names and numbers. It doesn't have start or end dates.
Okay, but it does have the amount that they're supposedly paying.
Supposedly.
Okay, what I would what I would do is I would add up your rent roll, and it depends on, a lot of rent rolls are different. You'll get some that have actual rent, and then there'll be market rent. Market rent is what they're supposed to be getting if everybody was paying market rent. So don't add that one up. No, because that's speculating. Go down the one that's actual, or they'll have some column that's what they're actually paying on their lease. Maybe it's called a lease rate. That's different words for it, but that's the one you want to add up. So this is how I do it. I add up all of the rents that they are actually collecting in this scenario. I will go through and see if there happens to be any vacants that are notated on that list. On the vacants, I'll go ahead and if it's not already in the column, I will use the market rate, because you're assuming that they're going to rent that out at market rate. You get that whole total as if you were full. You make sure you take out your 10% vacancy rate, even if that's not the rate of what the complex has had a history as far as I would take out 10% in this case, because you don't know what their history is. And then, do all your other numbers. But that's, at least you could project out from there, okay, if I bought this building today and closed, this is what I'm supposed to be collecting. So I should, times 12, should be able to reasonably collect this amount of money over the course of the next 12 months, minus the vacancy, minus whatever. That's how I do it, And then, from there, if you can get the P&Ls backwards, then you can look backwards and see, is there a reasonable uptick to this whole thing, or is it doing this, or what's going on? And that might help give you more answers too. Another way around that would be if you do end up in the stage where you get to the property, and this is another little tidbit that I'd like to do. When you go to do the property due diligence, if you go yourself, ask the property manager if they could pull up a current rent roll the day you get there. Oh, I left mine at home, make some silly excuse, because I've had scenarios where the rent roll they gave you was not the one that really happened, and the property manager doesn't know that unless they've been instructed, and so they pull it up unknowingly, give it to you, and you go, wait a minute, you told me the vacancy was here, and it's here, and uh-oh, so that's a good way to catch them in a uh-oh.